Morning. Thank you, sir. Welcome everybody to the City of Lake Forest Park Budget and Finance meeting for April 21st, 2022. And I think I want to make sure we have everybody here, counts and noses to make sure. Yes, we have everybody in-house, all the committee members as well as the broader council. Do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda?
Budget Chair.
Yes.
You do need to amend that agenda. I don't know if you adopt it and then amend it.
Yes, we can amend it. Director Vaughn is under the weather this evening, so we are not going to be reviewing the budget monitoring dashboard. So I would entertain a motion to adopt an agenda minus the director's report.
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda minus the director's report.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Lebo and Councilmember Riddle. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? The ayes have it. Aye. Let's move on. And so first, we're going to be starting with the capital improvement project update from Director Perigo. Mr. Perigo,
Hello,
you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Well, there's a few projects I do want to bring to your attention. One is the culvert project, for example. Design is 60% complete, and again, we're on schedule for construction pending funding. And if we could get some grants, that would be great. So summer of 2023. So we seem to be on target for that. So that may tie into some opportunities for grant money, which would be very helpful. The other project that we're looking at is the 35th Avenue drainage project. That is in design. They're doing their initial design assessment currently, and they're wrapping that up. And that would be on schedule for probably in 2023 also, given the parameters for that. As far as the 104 roundabout, design is 30% complete on that. We do have an issue that came up with stormwater. We have to install a vault. That's kind of slowed things up a little bit and increasing the cost on that. But that work is about 60% done design also. Those are the three major things I did want to bring up. There's some other things that our asphalt overlay project for later on this year, that's going fairly well with the county. We do have the street selected, and that may have been brought up at the previous meeting. But again, that seems to be in good shape. And as far as one of the happy stories is we should be getting some new carpet in City Hall early next month. So those are the major things I'd like to bring to your attention tonight.
Thank you very much. Questions, colleague? I see Councilmember Lebo, you're up first.
Oh, thank you. Director Perigo, you mentioned the street improvements project this summer. Do you recall which streets they are? And the second part of it is, are we ready to go if we need to do any curb improvements for ADA?
Right, there's very few of the curb repairs that need to be done there, or the ramps that I should say. The streets that we're looking at are 35th Avenue Northeast from Northeast 202nd to Northeast 190th. The second one is Northeast 192nd Street from 35th Avenue Northeast to 35th Place Northeast, and then 35th Place Northeast from Northeast 192nd Street to the north end of the road. Those are the primary streets that fall within our initial budget. We do have two other streets that we're looking at if the bidding does come out in our favor. Those would be 34th Avenue Northeast from Northeast 190th to the end of the road, and 33rd Avenue Northeast from Northeast 190th Street to the south end of the road. Those last two tie into the other streets, so that would be complementary for those.
The reason I ask about the ADA is that that appears to be bid separately. So are we ready to go for that?
I think in this one they actually included it. Let me confirm that. No, the county does not include that in this one, but my understanding is that there are none, or there's very few that need to be done within that scope.
Thank you.
Point of information, if there's any way for a diagram, a map highlighted to be shared with that, that would be helpful. I lost track of the
Right.
streets. I apologize.
I do not have that handy, but I could certainly provide one to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. Vice Chair Cassover.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Director Perigo, I just want to make sure that I wrote this down correctly. So the roundabout itself is, did you say that was at 30% design?
Roundabout is 30% complete, yes, for the design.
And then you said something about stormwater at 60% design, is that right?
That 60% was for the culverts. That was the culvert project.
Okay, but did you say there was something about a stormwater issue to do with the roundabout?
Yes, we do need to have some capacity to hold the stormwater for the area that we're expanding beyond the initial footprint that we have, because that roundabout is expanding that. So we do need to install a vault, which will fall somewhere within the roundabout itself. We're trying to work out exactly how to place that.
Okay, all right. So the vault is not at 60% design. Okay, I wrote that down wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. Councilmember Bodie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Director Perigo, can we see some drawings, not like detailed engineering drawings, but some drawings of the 30% design for the roundabout? Because I am quite interested in how big it looks in relation to the streets and so forth. So if there are some drawings that are not as technical, but give a good visualization of the roundabout, I would actually like to see them. In addition, I want to make sure that we're doing outreach to property owners, and whether, and it's a question how we're going to inform the general community about the roundabout. I realize we're only at 30% design, but certainly the nearby landowners should have a chance to look at that and weigh in at that level. And then further down the road, when we get to more detailed design drawings, how are we going to engage with the community? So those are our follow-up questions that I have that, you know, if we could address those down the road, I would appreciate it.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bodie. Additional questions? I'd just like to weigh in too. Thank you, Director Perigo. It's very exciting to hear about these projects, and the roundabout project particularly is one of interest to the whole community, and it will be very instructive for us to all be thinking about speeds, et cetera, as we're beginning our discussions about speed limits and traffic calming. As everyone knows, the speed limit around that curve is recommended at 20 miles an hour. And with a roundabout, there are different engineering standards and different considerations. And I know Councilmember Riddle also has been advocating very strongly for artwork, as well as several other council members within sort of showpiece places like that roundabout as well. A comment about the culverts, if I might. As we were coming into the meeting, there was a conversation about the $1 billion that's being allocated for culverts. And through the grapevine, I've heard that the vast majority of that money, unfortunately, is going to be for state-owned culverts. But that means that we have to really scramble, because if the culvert at I-5 gets replaced and is increased capacity by 4 or 5-fold, that means that the downstream culverts are going to be potentially challenged. And so we're going to have to really advocate very hardly with our legislative delegation and our federal folks to make sure that we can find the resources we need to ensure that the culverts downstream can handle the additional capacity coming down the stream, so to speak. So Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you. Going back, Director Perigo, to the street overlay program, I'm very interested to understand what kinds of pedestrian safety improvements we're making as part of the overlay program. So if there's a way to understand what's going to be done there. 35th is, as I walked around the city and was talking with people, people oftentimes said to me, I don't want to walk down 35th. It's not an area that I feel safe walking down because of the speed. And so when we do these overlay programs, I hope that we have a comprehensive program to address mobility for other than just vehicles, that we also look at pedestrians and bicyclists. And it's not just about speed limits, about its perception of safety. And so I don't think you can measure the need for pedestrian improvements just by counting the number of people who walk the street, because as I heard, people actually avoid the street because they don't feel safe. And so I don't want us to get into this little trap of thinking we don't make improvements because there's no one walking on the street. I think we need to make improvements so that people feel safe to walk on the streets.
Thank you, Councilmember Lebo. And just quickly on point, Cambridge, Massachusetts actually has a program that when they do street overlays, it's a requirement in certain areas that they do bicycle and pedestrian improvements at the same time. It's just food for thought. I'm happy to send out the information to everybody. Councilmember Riddle, please.
Thank you. In the same vein, I think referencing the Safe Street study when we do these overlays to see if they've already been identified would be useful. And I think that would be a useful tool to reference as you look at your overlay program. Okay, was this also an area that had this extra desire? As Councilmember Lebo said, I think some of those streets have already been identified as lacking in a desire for walkability. And then we can have that discussion of, is this the right time and place to make an attempt at an improvement? But it'd be good to know whether we're meeting the intent of the Safe Streets study as we do these overlays, or if we have to defer, just so that it's clear to us what the intent is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Riddle. Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, thank you. So a question for you, Director Perigo. I was hoping you could just provide maybe a bit of background information on how these particular streets or sections of streets were chosen for the overlay project.
Sure. These current streets were chosen primarily from the institutional knowledge from the folks from our operations group. Looking at the pavement condition, we do not have a current pavement condition index rating from the last, say, 4 or 5 years at least. So we will be doing that again this year, and that'll help guide us to determine which sections of pavement and roadways need to be redone. But that's the primary focus is looking at the pavement condition and trying to hit that sweet spot where you repave it before you have to do reconstruction.
Okay, thank you for that information. And something that occurs to me, you mentioned institutional knowledge, and that's something that I see a lot in my day job at the university. I would just like to, want to make sure that in the future, we make sure that institutional knowledge, and it very well may be, but make sure that it's covering this whole city to ensure that all corners of the city are being considered for where we might need more maintenance work. I'm not trying to insinuate that your office isn't doing that. Just something to think, that I think about when looking at where projects are on a map.
I absolutely understand that, and once we get our pavement condition and index study later on this year, that we should have a better idea holistically for where our pavement condition stands, and then from that we can also overlay different aspects of the city to consider different metrics, if you will.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Goldman, and Councilmember Furutani, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is again directed to Director Perigo. Thank you very much for your explanation of these projects that are going on. And adding on to Councilmember Riddle's comment, I know that we're trying to upgrade our GIS portal in the city, and I'm looking at the road overlay repairs map in our interactive site on the city site. And it only goes back to 2007, and kind of building off of Councilmember Riddle's idea, it would be great to have basically more layers on there that actually showed the last last time we touched those streets so that everybody knows, what kind of the cycle is for renewing these streets. I don't know if that information is available, but it certainly would help in terms of figuring out if there are areas of the city that we really haven't looked at in many decades. So is that a possibility?
I would have to get back to you on that, Councilmember Furtani. I don't have a full understanding of all the different databases that we have or layers of information. But going forward, that is something that we'd like to do, is get much more in tune with our GIS asset management system and start preparing that and having that ability to go back and say every, when things were done, and kind of set things on a schedule based on different parameters.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mr. Mayor, you've been very patient, please.
Just real quick, I'm sorry to bother your meeting, but guys, realistically, we're about $1 million short every year on what we should be doing to take care of our roads. We have a very good system. It's been going on forever. You walk around the roads and stuff, you'll see the ones that have all the cracks that are filled with the tar because we're trying to keep them from deteriorating. You've got other ones that get damaged by storm. But realistically, we are way behind and we don't have enough money. And, I know everybody wants sidewalks. Well, we tried to get some sidewalk money, but that obviously didn't work. So we're going to have to figure out another plan. But everything costs money. But, I understand we'd like a better idea of what we're doing and stuff. But I want you to rest assured that the $400,000, I think, is what we got to put into that pot right now. It's spent very wisely and very well. And, Frank was, we had and Jeff's just got into it, but Scott goes out, and it's we take our potholes pretty seriously. So I just wanted to get that information that we really need about another $1 million a year, and Tom can attest to that. We've been hearing that for 11, 15 years. So sorry to interrupt, and thank you.
Not at all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. And actually, just on point too, colleagues, this is an excellent kind of reset for us to think about what we need to do to finance these kinds of projects to ensure that we're maximizing our dollars, because as Mr. Perigo will attest to, that repaving a road and then putting pedestrian amenities into it later is not necessarily the best way to do it. There's much more efficient ways to do those projects and holistically, and it's incumbent upon us to help figure out ways to finance these particular projects. And we, as the mayor indicated, it's been about $1 million a year that we've needed for these pedestrian and other improvements for safety. And Mr. Perigo, one quick question I had for you, particularly about 35th. I run on 35th quite a bit, and it scares me. It's there's been times when I have had to jump off into the ditch, and fortunately it's more of a swale than a ditch. But when it comes to traffic calming, like speed humps or things like that, paving the road and then putting traffic calming measures in place like that, is that something that's sort of backwards, or is it really something that can be added later? Because as you'll probably see in our discussion on Monday, the science and the considerations for putting in traffic calming on certain more major roads is changing, and I think that there's opportunities to be far more pedestrian and multimodal centric, and less focused on the cars. But from an engineering standpoint, do I have this backwards, or am I close?
I think in the imperfect world, yes, you would do it as a holistic approach, take the complete streets approach, if you will, where you do consider pedestrians, bicyclists, and any other users there, and then come up with a plan to, whatever traffic calming method you want to use, install it in concert with each other. Sometimes when the pavement is so bad, you need just to replace it, and you don't have those other pieces of the puzzle ready to go or funded. Then it makes it more difficult. Obviously, the primary focus at that point becomes, the safety of the pavement, making sure that you can save that, as opposed to, waiting another 4 or 5 years before you are able to, install all of those niceties that you'd like to put in there. So it's a balance between, again, the roadway condition and then adding those other additional things that we'd all love to see, but sometimes the timing just does not work out.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for that answer. I appreciate it. Councilmember Lebo.
Yeah, I very much appreciate the discussion and the information and the clarity. And I think Mayor Johnson is absolutely right. We can't afford sidewalks, but we can afford to look at our streets to see how we can cost effectively make them safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. And I'm particularly interested in understanding, when we do these street overlays, are we at all considering safety for our pedestrians, or are we just thinking about roadway condition for our cars? And I'm not supportive of overlays if we haven't really given consideration to how we're going to address pedestrian and bicyclist safety. It doesn't have to be a sidewalk. It can be a curb, it can be cones, it can be reduced speed limits, it can be other things, but I don't think that we've really addressed pedestrian safety in this as well as we should, because I think sometimes we're just too focused on the only solution that we have for pedestrians is a sidewalk. And I absolutely disagree with that. There are many other ways to address pedestrian safety. And just paving streets to pave streets without addressing pedestrians and bicyclists, I think really does, it's truly a missed opportunity. So, you know, I hope people don't feel that my street got paved last year because I was running for the city council, but I gladly would have given up the pavement that was put down on our street for pedestrian improvements elsewhere in the city. And I used to live right off 35th, and I walked that road for 10 years. And it was a good thing I was young and agile at the time. And I just really haven't seen any improvements on 35th in the time since I've lived here. I've been here since I was in kindergarten. So I really want to see how we're taking our money, wisely spending it, not just on cars, but on pedestrians and bicyclists, and creating a sense of perception of safety so that people will want to walk and jog on these streets. And I absolutely agree with the other comments that we need to be considering other areas of Lake Forest Park and not just the areas around the town center.
Thank you, Councilmember Lebo. Colleagues, other questions for Director Perigo? This has been a very informative discussion. And yes, Councilmember Bodie, seeing things jumping around.
Yes,
Okay.
I simply wanted to weigh in and say I completely agree with Councilmember Lebo. I think that giving some thought to pedestrian safety as we're doing this, now that we do know that it's a priority for our citizens, but not one we have a lot of funding for, unfortunately. It's a very good thought, and I think it would make a lot of sense. So I encourage our Public Works Department to take a look at that, even if we could do fewer projects, even though, as the mayor says, we're behind. Our streets are still dramatically better than streets in Seattle. I drove to the polyclinic at Northgate the other day, and the roads around Northgate are, I mean, they're not roads, they're a series of patched potholes. So I don't want us to go in that direction, but I do think that paying some attention to this, even if we can't do quite as much as we have planned, would make a lot of sense and be cost effective. So thank you.
Councilmember Goldman.
On point in terms of cost-effective ways, because I strongly echo what Councilmember Lebo and others are saying. I happened to be walking around Lake City a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was 120th Street, kind of around Lake City Way. And what Seattle had done is they put whatever they're called, the cement blocks that are at the end of parking spots to stop the car. They basically just put a string of those up, and that effectively demarcated sort of a walking path on the side of the road for pedestrians. And I would imagine that is a fairly large, I would imagine it's a lot cheaper than a proper sidewalk, but at the same time, it accomplished the goal of separating people from cars. And as a pedestrian, it made me feel a lot safer. So yeah, I would definitely encourage the city to look at maybe non-traditional cost-effective ways at improving pedestrian and cyclist safety.
Excellent comments, everyone. And I think it goes with, speaking for all of us here, I think that the city has done a very, very good job with our overlay programs in the past. And we're trying to, in this new era of increased mobility by other means, trying to find ways to maximize our dollars here. And there was an excellent article, I'm sure many of you read it today, about trying to de-emphasize expansion of highways and trying to get into places where we're investing infrastructure regionally that makes sense. And it was highlighting Portland particularly about that, where they have an excellent program for multimodal transportation. Additional questions, anyone? Mr. Mayor, did you want to make any additional comments before we move on to the next topic? I'd be happy to give you the floor.
Yeah, just I appreciate what everybody said so far, and I understand. I'm frustrated too. I've lived here since I bought my house in '83, and we've never put a sidewalk in or anything. And I know that, and I ran 11 years ago and had the same idea. Well, I've been looking for the money for 11 years. And the overlay project is not considered anything but an overlay project to save our roads. And that's why you have Seattle and everything. But there's this phrase called roads to gravel, and roads that don't get taken care of will eventually turn into gravel. And that's why I want to do the pedestrian thing, but we cannot neglect our little bit of overlaying we do, because that's what keeps our city without the potholes. It makes Councilmember Bodie proud, and that makes me proud. But, and it's potholes are dangerous for bikes. I had a citizen call me about the potholes just there by the fire department coming to the mall, and, you get them fixed. But really, this is the quandary that we've all been in, and I would love you guys to help me figure out, because I want sidewalks, I want all that stuff. I know we can go wider when we do the asphalt, but every time we do something like that, we take less asphalt away. And so I want the help. I want you guys to give the ideas to Jeff and me, or whatever we could do to make all this stuff come true. But we really do need ideas. But in the meantime, we just cannot let our roads deteriorate, because that's all we have, so thank you. We've been trying, and I think we do a good job, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished with what we have. So thanks for giving me the opportunity, Tom. Thank you.
My pleasure. Vice Chair Cassover.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that myself and maybe others of us in the years we've been talking about this have maybe been a little guilty of using the word sidewalks to actually mean something different.
Indeed.
I know that those of you who are in the world of engineering, sidewalks means something very specific. I think to those of us who actually live in Lake Forest Park and walk on things that we think of as sidewalks that are actually not defined, could not define them as in the engineering speak as a sidewalk, that what we really mean is a safe walking path on the side of the street. And that is something that maybe we all need to pay, a little bit more attention to in how we use our language. That's what we're talking about in Lake Forest Park. We know we're not going to do curbs and gutters and all those things in all of our steep streets and our windy little roads, but we can create more safe walking paths. And I think that's what we're all talking about here. And I just want to be clear on that I don't think any of us here on the council have ever advocated the idea that we would be building, that top flight kind of sidewalk all through the city. Can't possibly happen. We can't possibly afford it. Costs a fortune. But there are some places, particularly along the highways, where I believe a proper sidewalk, is warranted. But our side streets, probably not going to ever happen. So just wanted to really be clear about that. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Councilmember Riddle.
Yeah, to reiterate, the Safe Streets does differentiate those different options, and it did recommend not full sidewalks for some areas. So it's a great resource to kind of see already the work that's been done. And again, it's leveraging the work we've already done. I think the other piece that I want, as we move into this question of safe pedestrian access, is remembering our bicyclists. And sometimes having a curb there works great for the pedestrians, but it means the area doesn't get cleaned by our street sweepers when we have, which can be a challenge for bicyclists. So again, it's a big question once we go beyond a strict overlay, and it's a big ask and a big lift to think about what else can we do with this money to leverage it? But I think the request is, let's at least look and know what we're doing, and know that it's intentional when we look at a sidewalk or a street and see what we want to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Riddle. Just quickly, I wanted to weigh in on, what Vice Chair Cassover said. Absolutely. Thank you very much for that distinction. I mean, I think we've kind of gone down the path here, pun intended, of talking about sidewalks. And in my mind, it's never been about concrete. It's been about a safe place for pedestrians to access. And just to that end, when the Burkham Trail was redeveloped in 2011, I was ecstatic when they added 2 feet of crushed rock that was graded appropriately, because it's easier on my knees to run on the crushed rock. It's harder from an exercise standpoint, but it's easier on my knees to run on the crushed rock than it is on the asphalt. And I think vast majority of people would rather walk in sort of a more natural environment than they would on a paved surface. And I think the other thing I wanted to mention too is the environment. If we're talking about sidewalks as a concrete entity, even permeable sidewalks, it increase the challenges with stormwater runoff. And I haven't seen yet, and I've spoken to several people who were at the forefront of that technology in terms of the permeable sidewalks. It really doesn't really work super well. They end up turning green. There are challenges when they're not clean because they don't filter, the water doesn't flow through, they turn into kind of a big catch basin. And there's some other things too. So anyway, I thank you, Vice Chair Cassover, for making that distinction, because I think that's really important for us to get away from that term of sidewalks, and maybe there's a more intelligent term that we can use. I leave it to the smarter people than me to think of what that would be, but I think it's a great point. With that, I think we will move on to the next topic, unless there's additional comments or questions for Director Perigo. Thank you very much, Director Perigo. This has been a great conversation. And next we have the ARPA lost revenue update, and City Administrator Hill, has this one.
Thanks, Budget Chair. And I just wanted to give a quick context to the dashboard that you did not see tonight. Once Director Vaughn is back in the office, which I assume will be no earlier than Monday. Well, I don't assume, I know. She will get that reviewed, get it out to the council in an email with context posted to the website. If you have any questions, just give her a call or shoot her an email and she'll clarify that for you. But she has not been in at all this week. So ARPA funding. So at the end of this month, we are coming up on our first requirement to do reporting to Treasury on the dollars that we've received to date. And at that same time, we have to identify the amount we're going to take as lost revenue. You will remember, or I hope remember, maybe this is first time for some, early on, Treasury gave these great tables and formulas with which cities, counties, states had to go through and calculate lost revenue. It was time intensive. It was not completely straightforward, had a lot of caveats to it. A lot of us went ahead and did that work. And then when Treasury came out with their final ruling, they completely pivoted based on all the feedback they'd gotten from all the entities and said that there's now basically, if you think about your taxes, a standard deduction. You can take up to $10 million of your ARPA funds as lost revenue and call it a day. And whatever you take as your lost revenue within that $10 million, you do not need to report to Treasury how those dollars were spent. Obviously, your auditors are going to want to know how those were spent, and you're still going to have all your backup documentation. But ultimately, it saves you having to calculate and then justify everything for Treasury. And so I wanted to I've got a slideshow. I want to take a few steps through this and then answer any questions that you might have on it. So let me get set back up because everybody disappeared on me so that I can see everyone. My screen will cooperate. Okay. So ARPA funding. So this is what I just went over. Cities can claim up to $10 million in lost revenue, similar as your standard tax deduction. We're well within that of just under 3.8 million in our total allocations. We received half of that last year. The other half will be coming within the next month or two. May, June is when we should be able to expect that. So at that time, we will receive the full amount that's shown on the right side of this slide. Where we've been to date out of that first disbursement of 1.884807, this, I should have updated that, sorry. This 2021 city revenue delta that we have already taken actually was 186,000. So 14,000 under is what we felt we could justify using that calculation initially. 335,000 was committed to hybrid meetings, leaving net funds. Then we took out the salary allocations. You've seen this slide before, but this is mine, Lindsay's, and the legal team's costs to administer these funds, administer the contracts between our community partners and our local businesses, and to do all of our reporting. So it left us an awardable fund. So what we've come down to is we had awardable funds. We've given 707,000 to community partners to date, 68,000 to small businesses, 70,000 to professional services and to IT. Professional services, that would be KDH filling in after Rhonda Signer retired and took us a while to get Aaron in. And IT on top of that, those professional services, just kind of the incidentals of getting the AV system up, some of the phone systems that we had to do. Leaving us with the remainder. The future small business that is on this slide at 300,000. So there's a sticking point with, if we take everything as lost revenue, that just rolls into the general fund, and that's colored general fund money. Then we can donate nothing to, or make grants to no small businesses, because that would be a gift of public funds. We cannot gift funds out of the general fund revenue into small businesses. So by carving out this $300,000, we've only received $68,000 to date in requests from small businesses. And we've got a few small ones in the works right now. This should leave us more than enough for the remainder of this year. 23 and 24 is the last time that we can allocate through, and then you have through 26 to spend. So that leaves those $300,000 as federal dollars that we could then allocate to small businesses. If those dollars go unspent, we could still allocate those dollars to a public works project. And I've told you before, we've got 3 on the back burner, some stormwater projects that we could do within the city. And we're going to explore that at some upcoming meetings with you, take a look at those projects. Because I think we're going to have some dollars, and we've put a lot out at this point. And so I think the next question is, what do we want to do to take care of Lake Forest Park with these qualifying costs for ARPA dollars? So long way of saying, if that $300,000 isn't allocated to small businesses, we don't lose it. We just allocate it to qualified projects, and we would have to report on that. So that leaves us a net disbursement of roughly 82,000 out of that first disbursement. Our next disbursement of the same 1884807, giving us a total bottom line of just under $2 million that we would call lost revenue. This wouldn't change anything going forward. Any community partners or any projects were identified by the administration still would come to the council, just as we have done in the past. Any contracts would come to you for review and approval. And as I stated before, any of these dollars that we spent obviously will be audited by our auditors. It just takes $2 million out of the pot that we have to take the time to report to Treasury, because that cleans that off their books. That was taken as lost revenue. And then just because we don't trust that Treasury won't change their minds, one of the qualifying costs that you can reimburse yourself for are police salaries. Our police salaries over the 3 years, 22, 23, 24, far exceed $2 million. And so if we had to back it up, we have, plenty of costs that qualify. Everybody says that Treasury won't change their mind, and, we're good, everybody's good to go, and that you can take that allocation as a standard deduction. But to be on the safe side, we want to have something in our back pocket to give them, honestly. But I think on top of that, us following the same process that we have to this point in time of how we've allocated the dollars, how we've come to council, how we will still require all the same backup documentation regardless, because we know our auditors will want it. But we do have to declare this by the end of the month when we make our April 30th first report to Treasury. If you do not make it a request to allocate a certain dollar amount to lost revenue, it just stays in and you follow the same process and you report everything to Treasury, regardless how the city chooses to spend those dollars. So I will stop sharing screen so everybody can see each other.
Quick comment before we jump into questions. I just wanted to say that I dug into the Treasury final rule, which I think is oxymoronic to call it the final rule because they keep changing things, as Mr. Hill said. So I don't believe we can actually expect that it's going to stay the same. And I do very much appreciate the fact that the administration is backstopping our making sure that we have backstopping our defense with the police and other things that are imminently fundable through all the Treasury rules down the line.
Can I make one more point?
Please.
I forgot to make.
bet.
Made is that we aren't in any way recommending that this just be rolled into general fund. We are recommending that this be tracked separately and that we continue to allocate it for the items for which it was intended to be spent. And so there are public works projects that we could spend this on. We still have community partners. We still have small businesses. And so this just is more of a reporting issue. It's not having to dot every I and cross every T with Treasury on these moving targets. And so absolutely not rolling this into general fund, not asking for that, not saying that we're going to pay salaries or we're going to do, projects with it. We do have the backup of police if you had to claim that, but I don't see that that's going to be necessary because our sole intent is to allocate these funds to qualifying projects per the ARPA rules. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. I appreciate that. Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. I think you may have touched on my question just a wee bit, but at the end of this month, we make this declaration. And so that means, but we still have the ability to make some changes. Is that correct? Or does that, how flexible are we after this first question, how flexible are we after this declaration?
Once we say we're taking the 1,967,647 as lost revenue, that's lost revenue. And then that money is no longer colored federal. We don't have to report it to Treasury, but it doesn't change how we've spent it because we've got the policy in place. We know how we've been spending it and we're recommending that not change. But yeah, once you declare it, that's it, you're done.
Okay. And then the 300,000, we would need to know what we're doing with it by the end of 2024 for the allocation period. And then we'd still have the 2 years to spend. Is that
correct? Yeah.
Correct.
So
okay.
in 2024, we start looking at it and going, okay, we're going to have a remainder of $150,000. Let's identify a public works project. We could supplement it with, what we've claimed as lost revenue, put together a package, commit it before the end of December 2024. And then we have till the end of December 2026 to actually spend those dollars on that project.
Okay. Thank you. I thought that's how it worked, but thanks for the clarification.
Yeah.
Colleagues, questions for Administrator Hill? Mr. Goldman.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to clarify, you had the slide that had the list of all the dollar amounts. For the money that the council's already approved, you made a distinction between small business and community partner, but then reserving funds for future use, you only had small business, but not community partner. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, yeah, and that's because for community partners, we can spend general fund dollars. So if we colored this, and keep saying color, but it no longer is considered federal dollars. It's now our general fund dollars. We can allocate general fund dollars to community partners. It's not considered a gift of public funds. For local business, we cannot. And so we need to keep an amount that is still considered federal dollars that will have to report to Treasury that we can allocate to those small businesses. So it's not a gift of public funds. It's just merely we're passing through federal dollars to small business.
Thank you for
So-
explaining that distinction.
So we could still allocate all $1.9 million to community partners if we so chose, if that need was there. But it doesn't matter. Because we already allocate general fund dollars to community partners on a biennial basis.
Excellent question. Thank you, Council Member. Other questions for Administrator Hill? Mr. Mayor? Or comment? You're muted, sir.
You know, when this all started and they put out the money for small businesses, which I applied for because of everybody need a lifeline. It wasn't a lot, but the paperwork was overwhelming. I mean, it was just overwhelming. And then to prove everything and have to get, so you didn't have to pay it back was even twice as overwhelming. But the longer it went on, it was also overwhelming for the federal government. And so it just kept changing and changing to where they had to put something in to make it a little easier on them. And it's kind of following the same thing right here. And I think what's going on is they're overwhelmed with all the stuff that they're going to have to figure out if we have to go every single penny to that way. That's why they're probably have an open space and it's not a lot of money compared to a lot of cities, but if it makes it easier on everybody. But Phil's doing a great job, and Lindsay, we have to keep track. I had to keep track all mine, but it makes a sigh of relief for a lot of people when you don't have to go through all the hoops just to get it done. So I think it's a great idea, and thanks, Phil. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If I throw
Please.
out there, I mean, we've got a small business right now that I'm working with, and they're still struggling. I mean, this small business, without the help, as you look at their financials from 2019 and 2021, the writing's on the wall that they're in trouble, and without this help, could go out of business out of the town center. So I'm happy that we have the dollars. These are small businesses. It's not huge dollars to them, but I think it's enough to keep them in business and hopefully get them back on their feet as we continue coming out of the pandemic. So, just a little sales pitch for an upcoming contract, you'll see.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. And on point, I would want to thank the administration for being very conservative about what we are allowing these funds to be used for very narrowly, as I indicated in a couple of my reports from the Sound Cities Association PIC, and Councilmember Bodie will attest to this, that some of the other cities are using the funds pretty free and loosely, and I think they're going to have some auditing challenges. And this is serving us very, very well to stay very, very mindful of what the reasonable allocations are. And just one last thought. The economic data that is coming out is really kind of challenging. And I listened to a long interview with Paul Klugman today from the New York Times, award-winning economist. And he was indicating that the economy is strong right now, but the challenge here in about 2 years is potentially could be devastating for some of these small businesses. So as we go forward, I'd like to think about making sure we kind of keep some things in our back pocket to make sure that we can help keep people afloat when this blip or dip, I should say, actually, or potentially occurs. Just food for thought for everyone. Any other questions for Administrator Hill? Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Mr. Hill, very much for that conversation. If you get a chance, if you want an interesting read, take a look at the final rule. It's I don't recommend it unless you have extreme insomnia, but there are sections of it that literally they contradict itself. It contradicts itself in multiple places, and so it's very challenging to understand what they're trying to say. And And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your comments about the federal government being overwhelmed, because I think that that's really kind of the case, and it's illustrated in this document. With that, before we get to public comment, is there anything else that the group would like to bring up this evening? I think we have, why don't we move on here then to public comment? We have one attendee here, Mr. McLean. We have Mr. D. Mike, would you like to make public comment tonight? I don't know whether this is Mike actual or a facsimile. Mike, any interest in making public comment? Give you a second to get.
Well, I
Okay.
don't need to talk. I don't know.
Okay.
It doesn't look like he wants to.
All right, no worries. Thank you. Thank you very much, Matt. All right, everybody, anything else for the good of the order? Mr. Lebo.
Just a point of information. Would it be possible to receive the presentation material a few days in advance so that we could review it and then have copies of it for the discussions? I apologize. I find it difficult for me to digest the materials when it's just presented to us as a group.
Thank you, Mr. Lebo. Mr. Hill, and for this particular subject, I think we'd have to defer to Director Vaughn to ensure that she has the capacity to do that. But Mr. Hill, any thoughts? Or we could certainly.
It's something we work towards. Honestly, I finished that slideshow today, so it wasn't ready to come out ahead of time. Yeah, let's see what we can work on. I don't think that slideshow would have had any context with it. Would have been difficult to understand, but maybe we can come up with something to provide in the future ahead.
Thank you, Administrator Hill. And Councilmember Lebo, yeah, I recognize that sometimes it's difficult, particularly on a small screen, to kind of digest things and ask questions. And I think that the administration is moving in that direction as much as possible to try to get things out in advance. So we'll see what we can do to assist them. But thank you very much for the suggestion. Councilmember Riddle, question, comment?
Yeah, a bit of a comment and perhaps slightly off topic, but you were mentioning the PIC, and I just got the announcement that Deanna Dawson from Sound Cities Association has moved to the Association of Washington Cities Chief Executive Officer role. So just kind of noting that, an interesting change in the landscape of the organizations that represent cities and around here. So see what that means, but congratulations to her, I suppose.
Yeah,
it's a good move.
Thank you, Councilmember Riddle. Yeah, Deanna has been such a friend to all the small cities, Sound Cities, as the name changed later. And we got the word this afternoon, and we work very closely with the Association of Washington Cities, so we're very pleased that she's not jumping ship to someplace outside of the circle of friends and trust. But at the same time, I'm sure Councilmember Bodie can attest that Deanna is irreplaceable with the Sound Cities Association, and I wish them all the best in finding someone that can step into the role. I won't say replace her. She's quite and if for those of you that don't know, she's an attorney, but she was also a city council member in the city of Edmonds for a number of years as well.
She is really awesome at picking topics and presentations of great interest, and listening and providing good feedback on what our Sound Cities are looking for. So she's unusually good, and we are going to miss her.
We are. Well, thank you for that, Councilmember Riddle, and your comments, Councilmember Bodie. Anything else for the good of your order, everyone? We're finishing up a little bit early here, but probably next time we'll have a little bit extra when Director Vaughn is back in the mix, and we all wish her the best. Hope she's on the mend very soon. with that, I think, oh, Councilmember Lebo.
Yeah, I can't help it. I'm sorry. I'm used to looking at when things like a status report for a capital improvement program update, that there's actually something to look at that gives not just the council, but the community an opportunity to see how we're progressing. Whether it's just a really quick dashboard, just a few lines, or something that shows the progress of what we're doing.
Thank you for that. Normally, I would say, I shouldn't say normally, I'd say in the past we've had a progress dashboard that, and with Mr. Perico getting his feet underneath him with all these different changes in our organization, I certainly understand that that's going to take some time to play some catch up on that particular endeavor. But I think that is something that is very useful for us, and we've had that in the past, and I know we'll get back to it here in very, very short order. So thank you for that. And if you want to, probably, Mr. Lebo, you probably have seen the progress dashboards, which has usually been the vehicle that we've utilized for the CIP programs. And I think we will certainly be able to get back to that, done in basically a Microsoft project that's understand it in Gantt charts and things like that. So if that helps in a small way. Mr. Perigo, did you want to give us some thoughts about timing on something like that going on for the future? Not to put you on the spot, Jeff.
I'll get back to you on that one. We're working towards that. We're working towards a number of other things too.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I know that there's been a lot of change. So we'll I know the administration will get there. With that, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, I think we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your evening, and be safe out there, okay?
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.
Night.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.